We thought it was just a prank, but when the knocks kept coming, we realized it was something much darker, something that wanted us inside. It was supposed to be a fun New Year's Eve with my little brother. Just us, alone at home. No big party, no fireworks. Just a quiet night watching movies, eating snacks, and waiting for the clock to strike midnight. I never imagined that by morning everything would change. The house was old, built in the early 1900s, creaky floors, drafty windows, and a front door that always seemed to be just a little off-kilter, but it was home. After our parents died 2 years ago, it was just me and my 10-year-old brother Adam. On that particular New Year's Eve, I was already stressed from work. I figured a calm night would help us both relax. We had dinner together, and then I let him play his video games while I cleaned up the kitchen. The plan was to turn off the lights, settle on the couch, and watch the ball drop. But something felt wrong. Around 10 p.m., I heard a knock on the door. It was strange. No one ever came by that late, especially not on New Year's Eve. I went to check through the peephole, but saw nothing. I checked the windows, nothing. Thinking it was a prank or some kids messing around, I shrugged it off. But then I heard it again. The knock. This time, louder, more insistent. My stomach dropped and hesitated but decided to open the door. There was no one outside, just the empty street, a quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing ever really happened. I was about to close the door when I noticed something strange. A piece of paper was wedged into the door frame. I pulled it out and unfolded it. The writing was sloppy, almost childlike, but clear enough to read. "Don't open the door again." My first thought was maybe it was just some kids trying to scare me, but then I remembered. Adam was upstairs. I quickly locked the door, checked the windows, and made sure everything was secure. I went up to Adam's room and told him to stay close. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice full of concern. "Yeah, just stay here with me for a bit," I replied. "Don't open the door for anyone, okay?" Around 11 p.m., the power went out. Everything went dark. We'd had storms recently, so I thought it was just another power failure. But something in my gut told me it wasn't normal. The house felt different. Quieter, colder. The wind outside picked up, howling against the windows. I grabbed my phone for light, but then I heard it again. The knock. But this time, it wasn't just one knock. It was a rhythm, almost like a pattern. It was coming from the back door. I didn't want to go near it, but Adam was starting to get scared. "Who's knocking, sis?" he whispered, his voice shaking. I don't know," I said, trying to keep calm. "But don't worry, just stay with me." I walked cautiously to the kitchen. The back door was locked, but the knock came again. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. I grabbed a knife from the drawer. The wind howled again, rattling the windows. The power flickered back on, but there was still no sign of anyone outside. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. I went to the back door, trying to peer through the window, but it was pitch black outside. The street lamp wasn't working. I couldn't see anything. Then I heard something even more chilling. A faint voice. "Let me in." It was faint at first, but then clearer. A man's voice, low and raspy, calling out from just beyond the door. I backed away, my heart pounding. I turned to Adam, who was staring wide-eyed at me. I whispered, "Stay quiet. Don't move." I rushed to the living room, checking the windows. From the corner of my eye, I saw something move in the yard, a figure. It was too dark to make out details, but the shape was unmistakable. Someone standing motionless in the yard, staring at the house. I grabbed my phone and called the police, but when I looked up again, the figure was gone. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an hour. The knocks came again. 3 knocks, then 3 more. But this time they were louder, closer. I could hear the scraping sound of fingers running down the door frame. I turned to Adam. "We need to leave. Now." We rushed toward the front door, but as I pulled it open, I froze. The man was standing in the doorway, his face hidden in shadow. "Let me in," he said again, his voice even raspier now. "I'm cold." I slammed the door shut and bolted it, my pulse racing. I grabbed Adam's hand, trying to keep him calm as I backed away slowly. "It's okay," I whispered, though I didn't believe it. "We're going to be okay." But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. The knocks stopped. The wind howled again. But then I heard the scraping sound again, this time on the walls, as though someone was dragging their fingernails along the siding, and then I saw it. Through the window, I saw him. The man. His face was distorted, unnaturally pale, eyes too wide, mouth stretched into a grin that wasn't human. He was smiling at me. Suddenly, the door handle rattled violently, like someone was trying to force their way in. I grabbed Adam, pulling him back into the kitchen. We huddled together, holding our breaths, waiting for whatever would happen next. But then it stopped. The house went completely silent. I dared to peek out the window again, but there was no sign of the man. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The rest of the night passed in agonizing silence. The knocking never came back. The wind died down, but neither of us slept. I kept the lights on, every noise making me jump. By morning, the world outside looked normal again. No sign of the man, no footprints in the snow. But I knew. I knew what I'd seen, and I'll never forget the look on Adam's face when he asked, "Who was that, sis? Was he real?" We never spoke of it again. But every year, when New Year's Eve comes around, I can still hear that voice in my head, faintly calling, "Let me in." I was alone on New Year's Eve, as I had been for the past few years. It wasn't a big deal to me. In fact, I preferred the quiet. The thought of crowded parties and loud cheers wasn't appealing. I spent the evening curled up with a book, praying God and listening to the sound of the rain tapping against my window. It was the perfect way to end a year that had been full of surprises. I glanced at the clock. It was just about to strike 12, and I was content with my solitude. I turned off the TV and set my phone on the coffee table, just as a sudden knock at the door made me jump. Who on earth would knock on my door at midnight on New Year's Eve? I stood there, heart racing, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe it was just someone from the building wishing me a Happy New Year. But the knock came again, louder this time. It wasn't the usual polite knock, but more like an impatient pounding. I walked cautiously toward the door, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. I looked through the peephole, but there was no one there. Confused and a little unnerved, I opened the door, expecting to find no one. But to my shock, the hallway was empty. No one stood at the door. No one lingered in the shadows. I stepped back inside, carefully locking the door behind me. I looked out the window. The street was quiet. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and I tried to shake off the strange feeling that had settled over me. Then my phone rang. I picked it up, thinking it might be a friend or family member calling to wish me a Happy New Year. But when I looked at the screen, my stomach dropped. The number was unfamiliar, one I didn't recognize. It could have been a wrong number, or maybe even a telemarketer, but something about it made me hesitate. I answered it anyway. "Hello?" There was a brief silence before a voice. "You shouldn't have answered." My blood ran cold. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the words. The voice didn't sound threatening at first, but the strange, almost detached tone made my heart race. I couldn't tell if it was a prank call or something else entirely. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "Does it matter?" the voice responded. "It's already too late." Before I could speak again, the line went dead. The sudden silence left me breathless, and I stood there, holding my phone, staring at the screen, as if waiting for it to ring again. But nothing happened. I felt a chill creep down my spine as I tried to rationalize the situation. It was just a weird prank, I told myself. Maybe it was just someone messing with me on New Year's Eve. But still, I couldn't shake this sense that something was wrong. The phone rang again, this time from a different number. My hand shook as I reached for the phone, dreading what I might hear on the other end. I answered it quickly, hoping the conversation would be normal this time. But the voice that came through wasn't the same as before. This one was clearer, and it sounded almost familiar, like I had heard it before, though I couldn't place it. "Don't hang up," the voice said. "You need to listen carefully." I froze, my breath caught in my throat. "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "You should have listened the first time," the voice continued. "Now you've made things worse." I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I couldn't explain it, but there was something in the tone of that voice that filled me with dread. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause, followed by a soft, almost inaudible chuckle. "It's too late to stop it now." Before I could ask what the hell that meant, the line went dead once again. I stood there, holding the phone, my body trembling. I didn't know what to think. I couldn't tell if it was a prank or something far worse. But I felt trapped, isolated, and confused in my own apartment. Thought about calling the police, but what could I say? Someone had called me twice on New Year's Eve and said some cryptic things. If I was imagining things. The footsteps continued, moving from the living room to the hallway, then back again. Suddenly, the door to my bedroom creaked open. I rushed to my feet, grabbing the nearest object I could find, a lamp, and crept toward the hallway. My hands were shaking. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Every creak of the floorboards made my skin crawl. I reached the hallway and peeked around the corner. There was no one there. But the door to my bedroom was wide open. I rushed into the room, my heart racing, and looked around. The room was exactly as I had left it. Nothing out of place, no sign of anyone. But the unsettling feeling lingered, gnawing at me from the pit of my stomach. That's when I found the note. It was lying on my bed, tucked into the folds of the comforter. The note was small, hastily written, and the words were scrawled in a hurry. I felt my blood run cold. My hands trembled as I dropped the note on the floor. I had no idea who could have written it, or how it got there. I stared at it for a long moment, my mind racing. I couldn't stay here. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of that apartment before whatever was happening escalated. I grabbed my jacket, shoved my phone into my pocket, and bolted out the door. But as I stepped into the hallway, the phone rang once more. I ignored it, walking as fast as I could toward the stairs. My mind was racing with thoughts of what had happened and who might be behind it. I reached the bottom of the stairs, but as I reached for the door to leave, I heard one final message. "We'll be waiting for you." I didn't look back. I still don't know who was behind the calls or how they managed to get into my apartment, but I've never spent another New Year's Eve alone again, and I'll never forget the terror that gripped me that night. The night had started like any other New Year's Eve. I was at home, alone, enjoying a quiet evening with my favorite horror movie playing in the background. I didn't mind being alone. It was a choice, really. I'd never been one for parties, especially not on New Year's. But this night felt different. Something about the stillness in the air made me uneasy, like I was being watched. But then, at exactly 11:58 p.m., the knock came. It was a soft, rhythmic knock, almost as if someone was waiting for me to answer. I froze. For a moment, I thought maybe it was someone from the building, someone trying to wish me a Happy New Year, or perhaps even a late invitation to a party. I looked at the clock. 2 minutes until midnight. I glanced through the peephole, but there was no one there. The hallway was empty. The knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. My heart started to race. I opened the door, half expecting to find someone standing there, but the hallway was still empty. I stepped out, peering down both sides. Nothing, no one. Confused, I was about to shut the door when I saw something on the ground, just outside. A small, black envelope. I bent down to pick it up, the chill of the winter air creeping through the doorway as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words hastily written, as if by someone in a rush. The handwriting was jagged and uneven. "You're not alone tonight." The words sent a shiver down my spine. The letter had been dropped just seconds before, but no one was there. I stared at the note, my mind racing. I checked the hallway again, and for a brief moment, I thought I heard footsteps behind me. But when I turned around, no one was there, just the quiet hum of the building's heating system. I quickly closed the door and locked it, my heart thumping in my chest. I looked around my apartment. I suddenly felt like a target, exposed. I tried to shake it off. It was just a prank, right? Maybe some kids from the building. But even as I told myself that, something didn't sit right. It was too late for anyone to be out there, and the letter felt far too personal. I returned to the couch, turning up the volume of the TV to drown out the thoughts swirling in my head. But the peaceful silence of the evening was shattered by another knock. This time it came from the window. I froze. The window? How? I quickly moved to the window, pulling back the blinds. The street outside was empty, the lights of the city flickering in the distance. There was no one in sight. I quickly pulled the blinds down, my pulse quickening. What was happening? I could feel the air grow colder, as though something was just outside, watching me. I grabbed my phone and called my best friend Rachel, but the call went straight to voicemail. I texted her instead, explaining the weird knock and asking her to call me when she could. I needed someone to talk to, but as I typed the message, I noticed something strange. A shadow moving in the corner of my vision. It was faint at first, like a blur in my peripheral. I turned toward it, my breath catching in my throat. The shadow vanished. I checked the locks on the windows. I double-checked the door. Everything was secure. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was in the apartment with me. I started to panic. The building was old and the walls thin, but I hadn't heard any footsteps. No creaking floors. Nothing. It wasn't until I sat back down on the couch, trying to calm myself, that I heard it. A voice. Soft, almost a whisper. I jerked upright, scanning the room. No one was there. I ran to every room, checking the closets, the bathroom, every corner. Nothing. The apartment was as empty as it had been when I first walked in. I thought I was going insane until I heard it again. This time clearer. It's time. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. I was paralyzed. The voice felt so real. It was as if someone was right behind me, watching me. But there was no one. The air around me felt charged, almost electric. My fingers trembled as I clutched my phone. I heard the voice again. This time, it wasn't in my head. It was coming from behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. I couldn't breathe. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I grabbed my phone and started typing another message to Rachel, telling her what was happening, but my hands were shaking so badly that I had to stop. I couldn't even form the words. And then I heard something more terrifying, a loud bang coming from the door. I slowly stood up, my legs weak. I couldn't explain it, but I knew what I had to do. I grabbed my keys and ran out the door, my mind racing. The hallway was dark, eerily quiet. I could hear nothing except the sound of my own footsteps. I wasn't alone anymore. The door wasn't the only thing that had been knocked. I turned a corner and ran into another tenant in the hallway, a man I'd seen a few times in passing. He was staring at me, wide-eyed, his face pale. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice shaky. Yeah, I stammered, unsure of how to explain it, but before I could finish, the power cut out. The entire building was plunged into darkness. I heard a scream, a woman's scream, from somewhere down the hall. It was high-pitched, frantic. The man next to me grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the stairs. "We need to leave," he said, his voice trembling. I didn't argue. My instincts screamed at me to get out of there. As we descended the stairs, I glanced back at the hallway above. In the darkness, I thought I saw something, or someone, standing at the top of the stairs, watching us. But when I blinked, it was gone. The man and I made it out of the building, but the night wasn't over. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. We stood on the street, surrounded by the quiet hum of the city. The cold night air bit into my skin, but I didn't feel the chill. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still there, just waiting for the clock to strike midnight. I had made it out, but the terror wasn't over. The real horror was just beginning. I watched the lights of the city twinkle in the distance. My phone buzzed in my hand. Another message from Rachel, this time asking if I was okay. I quickly texted her back, telling her what happened. But even as I typed, I knew that this night wasn't finished. The knock at my door, the voice, the scream. I couldn't explain it, and somehow I knew that this wasn't the last time something like this would happen. As I stood there, waiting for the police to arrive, I glanced over my shoulder. The street was empty, but deep down, I felt like I was being watched. I don't know if the terror is over or if it's just beginning, but one thing's for sure, I'll never spend another New Year's Eve alone again.